Hello everyone, welcome to episode 1 of my tutorial series. In this episode we are going to be covering a very basic patrol AI system for pawns in Unreal Engine. So let's go into the step-by-step here. You can see what the final product will look like. You have different patrol locations, and the pawns will go back and forth between the different ones that you set. So let's cover this. So here I have a very basic third-person perspective template provided by Unreal Engine. I did include the starter content, but we're not going to be using any of that right now, so you can leave that out if you wanted to. So let's first set up the environment for our pawns to run around in. So here we have some collision, light mass importance. This isn't really too important to us. Currently, post-processing, we're not going to need any of that, so we can just remove it. For the bottom, you can switch between the different modes by pushing W, E, and R. So we're going to push R, and we're going to scale this out much larger, so we have a nice little space to work with. It does kind of all blend in currently, so what I do recommend is you switch this over to like just a different type of color or something like that, so you can differentiate the walls. So we're just going to push the walls out a little bit, and I'm going to take this material and apply it to all the different walls here. And let's give them a little path to go from. So we'll scale them out and move this over, we'll move this one over, and move this one over. Cool. So the first thing we should do, let's get back to the content here. Cool. So we're at the content, we're going to make a new folder, we're going to call it BP for blueprints. And just save that right away. Perfect, we're going to open this up, we're going to create a new folder called AI here. And we're going to make a new blueprint, call it an actor, and we'll do BP underscore patrol location. So this actor is pretty much useless. All it really needs is something for us to see when we place it in the world. So I'm just going to put a sphere in, and we'll give it another material, something that you can see. We do want to make sure we disable collision here. So we're going to set no collision, and then I'm going to go into custom and make sure that it's ignore everything. Alright, and lastly, let's make this hidden in the world. Hidden in-game, yes, so we can, when we place it down, we can see it. So if I place this in the world right here, you can see our little controller character from the third-person examples right here, and there's supposed to be a little green ball as soon as we push play, but I push play and it's not there. We can run over it and we make sure that there is no collision indeed. Perfect. Alright, so now we need to make the actual AI itself. So we're going to do another blueprint class here. We're going to use character, because that gives us a lot of the movement component and all this other stuff that we're going to be using, and make our lives a little easier rather than going straight to a pawn. So we'll call it BP Patrol AI. And here we are. We're going to set the mesh to the, I'm going to just open up the third person character over here and steal everything from this. So I push the little magnifying glass that finds it in the content browser. We go over to Patrol AI and we click the little arrow, and that uses the selected asset. So you can see its bounding box doesn't perfectly line up, so we're going to move it 80 units down, rotate it 90 degrees, and it lines up perfectly with the little arrow. Perfect. You can also see that the capsule is a little bit bigger than it needs to be, I mean a little shorter, so what we're going to do is we're just going to raise that half height up to like 90 or something like that. Let's do 100. And then to offset this, we're going to have to move our character down another like 10 units or something. And let's come down here. Yeah, you see it's a little off. So I'm going to, what I'm actually going to do here is, I think above the character, yes, So I'm gonna bring this down to like 95, let's see. Right around there. Maybe even 92. That looks about right. The radius, I would say we should probably make it a little smaller. Maybe like 17. Looks like it's a lot more flush with the body itself. The downside of this is the character can clip through, the arms will be able to clip through the walls and stuff like that. But I think that's going to be fine for the purpose of this tutorial. Lastly, we need to stop the model from T-posing. So we're going to come back over to our third person character. We're going to do the same thing with the anim class. Use animation blueprint, and you see if I click the little thing here and we look at what this is provided from the third person template. It's just a basic state machine that has some idle, jumping, and whatnot, as well as a blend space for the walk and the run. So we can see that here. So I'm going to apply it. Here we go. Perfect, and our character is looking good. So next we need to set the AI controller class. It is already set, but what I do recommend is you use the Detour Crowd AI. You won't notice many differences, but they will do a little bit better at avoiding each other, and we can take a look at that later. So auto possess AI, if you want it, so it's when you place this pawn in the world, it'll automatically spawn with the AI controller. You can do this, but if you want both, when you say, for example, you use like a spawn actor from class node, you can use the placed in world or spawn. So we're gonna do placed in world or spawned, even though we're not spawning anything, but just in case in the future we need it, we're not gonna have to go digging through stuff. And this actor is always gonna be an AI, as it's a patrol, as we named it AI, so we'll know for a fact that it's always gonna be AI. We don't have to worry about spawning something in and destroying AI controllers when we don't need them. So this is all good on that front. Let me just make sure here. Perfect. Yes. Okay. So now comes the actual code part. So we do not need most of the events here. We're not going to be using tick at all. We're not going to be using begin overlap. We're not going to disable tick because the controller does need it. So we're going to leave tick enabled, as you can disable tick here. But we're going to leave it enabled. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create some variables. So the first thing we're going to need is, so we're going to call this patrol locations. And we're going to set this to be the actor BP patrol location object reference, and we're going to change this over to an array because we're going to have multiple patrol locations. Next, we're going to need a integer, and we're going to call this current patrol index. And we're going to make this not an array, just a regular variable. Perfect. Next, we're going to need a acceptance radius for pathfinding. So pathfind acceptance radius. If you don't understand what these words that I'm saying yet, don't worry, it'll all make sense in a bit. And I think that's it for now. We only need these three. So with variables, so say for example we place this actor inside of the world. You see when I click on it, when it's highlighted in the details panel, we don't have anything. Hold on, let's hide all this right here. Not now. So you see these are just the base default values. So when I open this up, and if I say instance editable on the patrol locations, we're on patrol locations, we come over to the details panel and it says instance editable. And it says whether this variable is publicly editable on instances of this blueprint. We're going to check that, and we're also going to do it for the acceptance radius. Now, when I place it in the world, you'll see on the left here, on the right, sorry, that we do have those patrol locations exposed and the acceptance radius. So the first thing we're going to want to do is set the acceptance radius to be, I don't know, 200, maybe 250. If I compile and save here, you can see that it automatically gets set to 250. So if I override this, so say I have one here, and I override this to 500, and it has a little arrow next to it, this is I can reset it to default. And we save everything, and then we come back over here, and we change this to 300. Compile, save, minimize. You'll see that this guy still keeps his 500, but anyone that doesn't have anything overridden will be set to the new default. So let's go back. We're going to delete this guy, and we're going to reset this to 250. Perfect. Alright, so now comes the fun parts. So what we want to do is we want to get the patrol location. So I'm holding control and I place it down, and that gets me a variable. If I don't hold control, then you get this little thing. You can get or set, but if you hold control while you place something, it'll just show the get for you. Perfect. And we want to get the length of this. We want to make sure that there are things inside of the array. So we're going to say if the length is greater than 0, and we're going to hook that up to a branch. So true. If it is greater than 0, then we know we can pathfind to somewhere. Because if it's less than 0, there's nowhere to go. You have no location set. So same thing, we're going to take it and we're going to get a copy. And from this, we're going to get current patrol index, which has a default value of 0. So indexes are structured as 0 is the first value, 1 is the second value, so on and so forth. So we're going to, out of this, we're going to say is valid. And we're going to see, is the location at index 0, is it a valid location? The only possibility is when it's, if it's not a valid location, is something like this. If I click on this guy and I add an element and you see it says none, and if I click on one and then I do it again, 0 here would be a valid location, but if we hit index 1, it would return is not valid. So we're going to remove both of these. We're also going to remove this guy for now. And come back here. Perfect. And so if it is valid, then off of this get, we're going to say move to location or actor. And it's going to be our goal actor. For the controller, all we're going to do is we're going to say get AI controller. And for controlled actor, we're going to get a reference to self. Perfect. So now we need to fill out some of the other variables here. So acceptance radius is going to be our pathfind acceptance radius. Stop on overlap is going to be no. Accept parcel path is going to be no. Use pathfinding yes, and all of this looks good. The actor isn't moving, so we don't need continuous goal tracking. So now we need to make a new event. So I'm going to say custom event. And we're going to call this find new index. So if I get the patrol location length, just copy paste what we had up there and we -1. Because like I was saying, 0 is the max and length would give you a +1. I mean 0 is index 1. So if there's one item in the array, it'll return 1, but we actually want index 0. So to get that, we're just going to -1. And we're going to say if it's equal to the current patrol index. So for at the very last value. So if the length -1 is equal to the patrol index, we are at the last value of the array. And we're going to say branch here. And if that is true, then we want to reset it. We want to set it back to 0. We want it to loop forever. But if it's not true, then we're going to take our current patrol index here, and we're going to do a little ++. Increment integer. And all this is going to do is it's just going to add 1 to the value. So we're just going to go one by one until until we get to all the positions. And once that's done, then we're going to restart. Perfect. So now what we need to do is we need to add a new event. So say custom event, and we're going to call this force walk to target. And we're going to plug that right up to the is valid. And then down here, we're going to call that event. So force walk to target. And lastly, the very last thing we need to do is we're just out of the on request failed, find new index. And we're also going to plug up the on move finished. So let's follow the execution here before we set up everything in the world. On begin play, when we start the game, what's going to happen is it's going to see other partial locations. We're going to see if they're valid, and then it's going to try and move to the first location. Since it's set to 0, it's just going to go straight into that. Once we reach the acceptance radius, or if we cannot reach it, say there's a wall blocking us and the AI got as close as it could, and then the nav mesh says, you know, there's no path here, so it'll say on request failed. So what we do is we find new index, so we find the next index, right? It would be ++ if we have more than one, and it would go back again, check, make sure that it is valid, and do that the walk again. Actually, I just realized there's one last thing we need to do. We just need to copy paste this event and say if it's not valid. So if we move to the next index and there's no valid location, then we need to skip over it, and we're just going to go to the index afterwards. And I think we are all done here, so let's give it a little testaroonie. So I'm going to take this guy over here. I'm going to move him on the opposite side of a wall. And I'm going to set down 4 patrol locations. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Here we are. Perfect. And then I'm going to take this guy. And you see here we have the exposed values. So I'm going to add 4 of them since we have 4 different locations. And I'm going to set 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then I'm going to push Control W and copy paste this guy a bunch of times. But first, actually, I want to set the snapping so they distance themselves a little more. And we'll just create 4 of them. And I'm going to drag each one to a different side of the wall. So here we have 4. And now I'm going to take this guy. I'll show you another way you can work with arrays down here, or any real variable that ties to an actor. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick this one, use the little eyedropper, pick number 3, and we'll do this one and pick this guy right here. And we are still using 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that's good. And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to copy this guy 4 times, and we're going to send one off to each side of the wall. Perfect. So now let's give it a play and let's see. So when you're working with AI or really anything in Unreal, what I recommend is you push apostrophe, and this should pop up where it says category AI, and you see these red dots through the walls, and then you push tab, and that puts you in spectator mode so you can see what's going on. And we look at our guys here and we see they're not moving. Oh no, what's wrong? Well, to pathfind in Unreal Engine, or really any game engine, you need what's called a nav mesh. And a nav mesh essentially is a pre-generated area where essentially AIs can see on the ground like what is a valid path, and it allows them to move around the world. So we're going to look in here and we're going to say nav, and we're looking for a nav mesh bounds volume. So I'm going to place this in the world. I'm going to make it clip through the floor. We don't need it to be high since there aren't many objects in the world, but you do want the height to cover everything. So here, for example, I'm going to just expand on the X and Y axis here, and we're going to expand it out. So it's covering most of the world. And I'm going to push P, and what this does is it allows you to visualize the nav mesh. So you can see it's not perfect, right? You do have these areas where it's not like conformed to the wall or anything like that. And like I was saying earlier, since it's very small and it doesn't cover the height of this right here, it only goes up a couple steps. So if I wanted it to go up past those steps, I can expand the Z axis here and it would cover that. Now you do see that there are some breaks, right, in the nav mesh, and it doesn't perfectly cover everything, but this gives you a very good reference for basic starting point for when working with it. And you can go into the settings of Unreal and change it, but it is project-wide settings, so you can't have maps that have special versions of nav meshes without doing intensive changes to Unreal Engine code. But that's getting ahead of ourselves, so let's just give this a test now, and let's make sure it works. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go full screen, I'm going to push apostrophe, and I'm going to push tab. I don't even need to do that, but you can already see them running across. So if I scroll back out, you can see, and it also highlights for you the nav mesh for, you'll see that this guy right here, he has a bigger red circle around him than the other guys around him, and that's because we're following this guy. And that has to do with the direction you're looking when you push apostrophe. So you see if I look around and I push apostrophe, it starts selecting different ones. But that's not really a big deal, we just want to see all the little red dots and make sure that they're moving properly. And it's not really apparent, so let's spawn in like 1,000 actors, not actually 1,000, but a lot. It's already kind of a long video, but that is okay. So I'm gonna select all of these guys here, and I'm gonna copy them and drag them out, and copy and drag them out, and copy and drag them out. Push Alt P to play, and we're going to do the same thing. And hopefully now we can see that they start avoiding each other. It doesn't really help that they are all lined up. So let's yeah, I know what to do. We're going to move our player over, and we're going to put these guys really, really close to each other. And at the same time, we're going to set them to have different paths. So we're just going to reverse all their paths, so they run in opposite directions. Perfect. So we'll go here, like that. And we'll do 4 is now 1, 3 is now 2, 2 is now 3, and 1 is now 4. Push play. And you can see that they pass each other perfectly. If I go out again, they're going to both circle around, and we'll see where they meet up here, right here, and you should be able to see that they properly avoid each other. Perfect. That's the Detour AI that we said earlier working its magic. Perfect. So that about wraps up this episode. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about seeing the player and doing some different things, like maybe following the player when they see him, or maybe even attacking. We're probably not going to get into health systems or damage or anything like that just yet, but if you guys have any recommendations for tutorials you are interested in, just let me know, and I will be sure to cover them. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.